The corridor of a Naval Special Warfare Command building smelled faintly of disinfectant and machine oil. Overhead, the fluorescent tubes hummed with the kind of monotony that could lull a person into forgetting time existed at all. Larissa Thorne pushed her battered cleaning cart forward. The squeak of the right wheel softened by years of careful maintenance. She was 42, though most people didn't know or care to guess her age. She moved like someone who had mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight, shoulders rounded, chin tucked, eyes aimed at the floor. Her hair, streaked with gray, was hidden beneath a faded navy cap, its brim shadowing her face. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a civilian janitor working the night shift. At least, that's what everyone thought. From down the hall came the unmistakable rumble of voices, SEALs returning from a field. Larissa slowed her pace. She knew their rhythms, their habits, their blind spots. 3 years in this building had taught her the value of timing. If she entered the team room too early, someone might remember she was there. Too late, and she'd miss the conversations worth hearing. Commander Zachary Westfield's voice carried through the open doorway, low and commanding, discussing adjustments to insertion points, satellite intel, and time windows. Larissa pushed the cart inside, her gaze fixed on the floor tiles. 5 men stood around a table cluttered with maps, photos, and gear. No one acknowledged her. She could have been a potted plant for all the notice they gave. Lieutenant Tavish McAllister was slouched in his chair, boots on the table, crushing the corner of a map. He tossed an empty energy drink toward a bin and missed by 3 feet. "Distraction's going to be tight if that satellite read is right," he said lazily. Westfield didn't even look up. 2 hours max, then we're burned. Larissa bent, retrieved the can, and slipped it into the bin. Her hands moved with the steady, efficient rhythm of someone who had done this 1,000 times. McAllister smirked at her. "Hey, mop lady, you even speak English?" No answer. She kept wiping down the edge of the table. Westfield flicked his eyes at McAllister. "Focus." Larissa circled the room, picking up trash, dusting surfaces. When she reached McAllister's boots, he shifted them suddenly, forcing her to stumble and bump the table. A cup of coffee tipped, spilling across a folder. "For crying out loud." McAllister snapped, leaping up. Westfield gathered the papers quickly. "Careful around sensitive material," he said, his tone polite but dismissive, the way one might speak to a child. "Sorry, sir," Larissa murmured, her accent shaped into something vaguely Eastern European. McAllister grinned at the others. "See? Locals in secure spaces. Bad idea." A couple of them chuckled. Petty Officer Ronan Blackwood didn't. He watched her for a moment longer than the rest, noticing something in the way she moved. A flicker, so brief it could have been imagined, where her spine straightened and her eyes sharpened before she masked it again. They went back to talking operations. She went back to cleaning, but her ears caught every word. "Any word on Shadowfall?" Westfield asked, his voice dropping. "Scrapped after the Wraith fiasco," one of the men replied. Extraction was a mess from the start. Her hand stilled for a fraction of a second. Then she moved again, unhurried. As their conversation shifted to weekend leave, Larissa kept her head down. But in her mind, the pieces of a puzzle she had been building for years clicked closer together. She had been waiting. And perhaps, at last, the wait was ending. By mid-morning the base felt overpolished. Floors reflecting ranks of boots, brass glinting. Conversation flattened into protocol. Word traveled fast. A flag officer was inbound. That kind of news moved through corridors like a weather front, changing pressure and posture alike. Larissa timed her route with the janitor's clock in her head, arrived just after the salute, before the doors close. Remain within earshot without becoming a silhouette anyone can recall later. She wheeled her cart toward the briefing room. The squeaky wheel miraculously quiet today. She'd oiled it at dawn, anticipating a day when silence would matter. Admiral Quentin Hargrove entered with the gravity of a man who had signed too many condolence letters. Weathered face, careful steps, a stare that measured not just people but the spaces around them. Beside him walked Intelligence Officer Maeve Calloway, sharp suit, hair pulled tight, eyes that filed everything and showed nothing. Ten Hut. Chairs scraped and boots aligned. Commander Zachary Westfield stood blade straight. His men followed a half-beat later. Larissa slipped through the door behind a logistics petty officer, head bowed, hands busy collecting coffee cups left like breadcrumbs. She kept close enough to catch the first sentence. Operation Silver Spear has been compromised, Hargrove said without preamble. The air thinned. Our asset extraction failed. A faint clink traveled the table as someone's ring hit a mug. Westfield's jaw tightened. Sir, is this related to Shadowfall? Calloway's gaze drifted, past Westfield, past McAllister's scowl, briefly alighting on Larissa as though checking a piece of furniture for dust. If the glance lingered, it was only by a fraction of a heartbeat. Yes, she said. Indirectly. Hargrove continued. The intelligence network established by Operative Wraith has been methodically dismantled over the last year. Our most recent asset, codename Nightshade, attempted extraction with priority intelligence on Chinese naval movements. Communication ceased at 0203. We have no positive link-up. He let the words settle, heavy as ballast. Nightshade is presumed Kia. A muscle jumped in McAllister's cheek. He folded his arms as if bracing himself against a storm. Third asset this year, he muttered. The package. Westfield asked. Not recovered, Calloway said. Her voice was precise enough to cut copy paper. Extraction team exfiltrated with casualties, but no data. Larissa moved along the wall, emptying bins, wiping rings off wood. To anyone watching, she was an unnoticed rhythm. Inside, the mental map she'd cultivated for years, names, codenames, timings, anomalies, spun a notch tighter. A thin scar at her wrist itched beneath. Her sleeve. She resisted the reflex to scratch. Scars had memories. So did she. We believe the compromise originated here, Hargrove said, eyes sweeping the room with no apology. Not this team specifically, but this command. After Silverleaf, he stopped, as if the room itself might flinch. After the Amaranthan extraction 5 years ago, we suspected foundational vulnerabilities. Silver Spear confirms it. The name drew a hush that sounded like respect or superstition. Silverleaf. The word lived in a different register, whispered in training scenarios, footnoted in redacted reports, attached to ghost stories about impossible tradecraft, and a final mission no one could verify. Blackwood, newer to the unit, rocked his weight off his heels, absorbing the ripple he felt but couldn't yet place. Larissa's rag paused, a breath, and resumed. She pivoted her cart to the shadows near the rear door, where acoustics turned murmurs into intelligible fragments. We'll run a full compartmentalization review, Westfield said. Talk to me about blast radius. Contain for now, Calloway replied. But containment is a clock. Whoever's bleeding us is disciplined, patient, and close enough to taste our processes. McAllister leaned forward, hands splayed on the table. So we keep letting civilians swim in our lanes, and then act surprised when sharks show up? Hargrove ignored the barb. Operationally, you'll continue scheduled training. No taskings until we clear the pipes. Anyone who feels the urge to leak, grandstand, or speculate on classified matters, don't. You'll find our patience is as short as our list of friends. He closed the folder with an economy of motion. Questions. Blackwood raised a careful hand. Sir, do we have any positive indicators? Any reason to think Nightshade's intel might have reached a secondary channel? Calloway's eyes flicked to him, the kind of glance that logged a name for later. We have contingencies, she said. And contingencies for our contingencies. A non-answer that still meant something, if you knew what to listen for. Dismissed, Hargrove said. Westfield, you and your exo stay. Chairs scraped again. The room emptied by rank and ritual. Larissa took longer than necessary to bag the trash, wiping a clean section twice, letting fragments of the private conversation reach her. Phrases surfaced, sank. Timing window. Offshore accounts. Pattern transfers. Internal audit demands. Calloway spoke quietly, but patterns didn't need volume to be loud. In the hallway, McAllister shouldered past the janitor without apology, rolling tension ahead of him like weather. Blackwood hung back, watching Larissa's practiced smallness. How she made herself perimeter, never center. He couldn't have said why, but something about the performance was too consistent, as if she'd rehearsed being ignored until it fit like a uniform. By afternoon, the building resumed its ordinary mask. Paperwork multiplied, inboxes filled. Men told jokes louder than they felt like laughing. The day's adrenaline drained into irritation. Larissa pushed the cart down the squad bay, collecting laundry bags and bottles no one had claimed. McAllister's wastebasket was full of torn protein bar wrappers and a crumpled receipt. As she pulled the bag, he tipped the bin with his boot. Trash scattered like confetti. Oops. The smile didn't touch his eyes. Hazard pay for that, mop lady? She knelt, picking up wrappers, a torn corner of a bank envelope, a smear of dried mud that wasn't the local color. She didn't look up. She did see, in her peripheral vision, Blackwood standing at his locker, half-turned. Attention split between his gear and the quiet humiliation he couldn't justify intervening in. He wasn't her target. She noted him anyway. Observers mattered. Maybe if we stopped outsourcing security to the custodial corps, McAllister said to no one and everyone, we wouldn't be triaging dead assets. Larissa placed the last wrapper in the bag, tied a neat knot, and rose. For the briefest instant she met Blackwood's gaze. It was nothing, half a second, less, yet in it lived an entire vocabulary. Assessment, inventory, distance. A flash of cold appraisal that vanished so quickly he doubted it had been there at all. Evening sank over the base, the sky bruising purple at the edges while the barracks glowed fluorescent. Liberty Call emptied the common areas. The people who stayed were the ones too wired to sleep or too worried about being alone with their thoughts. Westfield's core team gathered around the scarred table again, beers sweating rings onto wood. The conversation was classified and casual at once, the way soldiers talk when formality is exhausted but the habit of secrecy remains. The intel was clean, Westfield said, pacing slowly. We were late to the drop. Period. Or we were fed a line from the start, McAllister countered, bottle cap clicking between his fingers. We've been chasing shadows since Silverleaf vanished with those amaranthine protocols. Silverleaf didn't vanish with them, Blackwood said, careful but firm. Training files say the extraction succeeded. Kia in the process. That's what the pamphlet says, McAllister snorted. Doesn't mean it's the truth. Larissa moved along the far wall, wiping surfaces that didn't need it, a harmless ghost orbiting their gravity. If they noticed her, they didn't show it. Habit dulled edges. Half the community thinks Silverleaf went rogue, Westfield admitted, lowering his voice. Took amaranthine off the grid. Half the community loves myths, McAllister said. Want my opinion? That's the risk of letting emotion drive an op-deep cover for years. Eventually something breaks. People start believing they're the mission. Silverleaf had the highest success rate in the program, Blackwood said. 3 years, 0 compromises. Until the last minute, the only minute that counted. McAllister flicked the cap. It skittered, hit a chair leg, rolled to a stop near Larissa's shoe. He nudged an empty bottle off the table with deliberate carelessness. It wobbled toward the edge of her world. She bent to pick it up, unhurried. Her spine uncoiled a millimeter. If anyone had been watching for it, and no one was, that small shift would have registered as danger. Inside her, a quiet decision settled into place, clean and final. Not yet, she told herself. One more turn of a lock. Should have sent a SEAL team instead of betting the farm on an intel diva, McAllister said, stretching the provocation. Hardware beats, head games. Westfield shot him a look. Enough. Just saying what everyone's thinking. No, Blackwood said. You're saying what you're thinking. Silence spread, sticky and awkward. Somewhere down the corridor, a TV murmured sports noise. A vending machine hummed. The world's most ordinary soundtrack to treason and heroism alike. Larissa finished the last pass with the rag and set it on the cart with the kind of care that says a thing is done, not the cleaning, but the waiting. She had listened long enough to learn what she needed. She had been small long enough to be sure who would show themselves when they thought no one important watched. Blackwood stood, restless, and drifted to the sink, rinsing his glass while he watched Larissa in the reflection on the window. How she took up exactly as much space as a shadow. He didn't know what he was seeing, only that it didn't fit the box labeled invisible. Westfield rubbed his temples. We hold position until morning. Admiral wants us in at 0600. If Silver Spear burned because of an internal leak, we're all under a microscope. Let them look, McAllister said, cocky armor snapping back into place. I'm clean. Larissa slid the empty bottle into her bag. In the motion, her sleeve rode up a fraction of an inch, exposing the pale crescent of a scar. Blackwood caught the ghost of it in the glass. It meant nothing to him and everything. She glanced at the wall clock. Time to end chapter 1 of a long play. Time to set the room on a new axis. The men settled, unaware that the ground had already shifted beneath them. Larissa's reflection blinked in the window, cap brim, bowed head, the world's safest silhouette. She reached for the mop, then stopped, hand hovering over the handle, a soldier's hand remembering the feel of something else, steel, weight, authority. Not yet, but soon. When she spoke, it was only to excuse herself, soft, accented, forgettable. She pushed the cart toward the door, letting its wheels whisper across the tile. As she crossed the threshold, their talk resumed, the same chorus of doubts and bravado and half-true legends. In the hall she paused where the acoustics carried. She closed her eyes for a second and filed the final puzzle piece where it belonged. Nightshade presumed dead. Silver Spear compromised. Offshore money. A handler arrogant enough to think he was invisible. Echoes of the past had grown loud enough to chart the present. Tomorrow would be revelation. Tonight required one more mercy. A last chance for men to decide who they were when the room stopped pretending she didn't exist. Larissa opened her eyes and moved on, a ghost slipping back into the building's capillaries, leaving behind nothing but polished surfaces and a quiet that, for the first time in years, felt like the hush before a door unlocks. Night had settled over the base in that restless way military nights do, quiet and sound, but humming with undercurrents. Outside, sodium lamps bleached the asphalt in pale cones. Inside the barracks, the air was thick with the smell of beer, gun oil, and fatigue. Westfield's core team was gathered again, hunched over the same scar table. Bottles sweated onto the wood, their condensation mingling with the ghosts of 100 debriefings before. Larissa moved along the room's perimeter like she had 100 times before. Her rag traced lazy circles across already clean surfaces, her mop gliding along the tile with the rhythm of someone who wasn't really there. The men barely registered her anymore. Habit had erased her from their attention. Intel was good, Westfield said, pacing slowly. We were just too late. Or it was bad from a start, McAllister replied, leaning back in his chair, beard dangling from his fingers. We've been chasing ghosts since Silverleaf disappeared with those Amaranthan files. Silverleaf didn't disappear, Blackwood said, his tone careful. She died securing them. That's what the file says. That's what the file wants you to think, McAllister shot back. Long-term deep cover? People crack. They start thinking they're more important than the mission. Blackwood's jaw tightened. She had the highest success rate in the program. McAllister smirked. Until she didn't. He flicked an empty bottle across the table. It clinked and rolled toward Larissa. She bent to pick it up. And then, without looking up, she spoke. Her voice was nothing like the mumbled, accented murmur they'd heard for 3 years. It was crisp, commanding, perfectly American. Amaranthan Protocol. Authorization Silverblade 7 Delta 9er. The bottle froze in her hand. The room froze around her. Westfield stopped pacing mid-step. The glass in his hand slid from his grip and shattered on the floor. McAllister blinked at her, the color draining from his face. Blackwood, without thinking, stood at attention. Larissa straightened, shoulders back, chin up. No slouch, no shadows. Her eyes met Westfield's, steady and unflinching. That code, Westfield said slowly, was decommissioned 5 years ago. Only one operative ever had it. I completed the mission, she said. Every objective. While your team ran a diversionary extraction, I uploaded the Amaranthan files to secure servers. You left before confirmation, exactly as ordered. McAllister's voice cracked. No. Silverleaf is dead. The record says what it needed to say, Larissa replied. Sometimes the safest place to hide is in plain sight. My death was part of the cover. For 5 years, I've been embedded here, monitoring security leaks, evaluating personnel, and tracing compromised channels. And now my mission is nearly complete. From her pocket, she pulled a small black device and set it on the table. Its single LED blinked a steady green. That drive contains evidence of a coordinated intelligence breach originating from this command, she said. It will be in Admiral Hargrove's hands at 0600. I suggest you prepare for debriefing. Westfield found his voice. Why now? Why break cover? Larissa's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her gaze. Because Nightshade wasn't compromised. Nightshade succeeded. The intel is already secure. And the operation that began with Amaranthan is finally finished. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door, looking directly at McAllister. A real soldier knows respect is earned by character, not rank. Remember that during your court-martial. The door closed behind her with the soft finality of a locked vault. The men sat in stunned silence, the room suddenly feeling too small, too bright. For 3 years, she had been their ghost. Now they knew who she really was. The next morning, the SEAL team filed into Admiral Hargrove's office with the stiffness of men who'd barely slept. Westfield's face was stone. McAllister's was pale and tight, like he'd been clenching his jaw all night. Blackwood looked different, alert, cautious, like someone trying to see every moving part of a machine at once. Behind the Admiral's desk stood Larissa Thorne. No mop, no cart. Her uniform was immaculate, her ribbons and insignia a silent rebuke to every man in the room who'd once ignored her. The transformation was jarring. She didn't just look different. She carried herself like she owned the air and the space. Gentlemen, Hargrove said, his voice grave. Allow me to reintroduce Lieutenant Commander Larissa Thorne, call sign Silverleaf. The most decorated intelligence operative in naval history, and the architect of our longest-running deep-cover operation to date. McAllister's Adams apple-bobbed. Westfield was the first to recover enough to move. He stepped forward and extended a hand. Commander, my respect and apologies. If we'd known. You weren't meant to know, Larissa said, shaking firmly. Your team performed as expected. Every mission has compartmentalized information. I had mine. You had yours. Hargrove gestured to the seats. You're all here because you've been working under the umbrella of Operation Ghostwalker. After the Amaranthan incident 5 years ago, we suspected a leak inside Naval Special Warfare Command. We couldn't investigate openly without tipping our hand to the mole, or moles. So we staged Silverleaf's death and embedded her here, where no one would look for a threat. Blackwood spoke up quietly. A janitor. The perfect disguise, Larissa confirmed. Invisible. Harmless. Beneath notice, even to people trained to notice everything. She placed the small device she'd carried last night onto the Admiral's desk. With a tap, it projected a network diagram onto the wall, nodes, lines, and red dots scattered like a web infected by rot. This, she said, is the leak. Systematic information compromise linked directly to Chinese intelligence. It's been happening for years. Not random breaches, targeted acquisitions of operational details. Hargrove looked to McAllister. Lieutenant, your name came up early. Offshore accounts. Deposits matching the timing of classified leaks. Explain. McAllister's voice cracked. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't bother, Larissa interrupted, her tone flat. We traced the transactions. Your arrogance was your tell. You were too loud about operational security to cover the fact that you were gutting it from inside. 2 military police officers entered and flanked him. McAllister started to protest, but Hargrove's voice cut him down like a blade. You are relieved of duty, pending court-martial. Take him. The MPs walk him out. His boots echoed down the corridor until they faded into silence. When the door shut, Hargrove turned to Westfield and Blackwood. "You're cleared of any involvement." In fact, Petty Officer Blackwood's observations were noted in Commander Thorne's reports. Blackwood looked surprised. "Sir." Larissa's gaze softened just slightly. "You noticed what others missed. You questioned inconsistencies. Those instincts are rare. Don't lose them." "From the start," Hargrove continued, "this op had one goal: find the leak, plug it, and make the enemy believe we were blind until it was too late. Nightshade's so-called failure was part of the plan. While you ran the extraction everyone saw, Nightshade moved the real package through a secondary channel under Commander Thorne's supervision. That data is secure. The mission was a success." Westfield leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So, all the times we thought we were improvising." "You were," Larissa said. "Just not in the way you thought." Hargrove stood. "Commander Thorne will remain lead on counterintelligence until the last threads of this network are cut. After that, she's been offered her choice of assignments." Larissa nodded once. "South Pacific Command. Counterintelligence Division. Appropriate given what we've learned." Hargrove gave her a measured look. "The Navy needs Silverleaf back. Not the ghost. The real one." For the first time that morning, a hint of a smile ghosted across her face. "I'll see what I can do." The morning sun hit the base parade ground like a blade of gold, slicing through the sea air. Rows of Navy personnel stood at attention, uniform sharp, eyes forward. At the center, in front of the flag, stood Lieutenant Commander Larissa Thorne, Silverleaf, wearing the dress whites that had been hidden away for years. Her chest bore the ribbons and medals she had earned, though few in the crowd could name what each represented. Admiral Hargrove stood beside her, the Secretary of the Navy on her other side. The cameras and reporters, carefully cleared for this public portion, recorded every second. "Lieutenant Commander Thorne," the Secretary said, his voice carrying over the formation, "your actions represent the highest traditions of naval intelligence. You endured years in hostile and compromised conditions, safeguarding secrets that, had they been lost, would have put lives and national security at risk. For this, you are awarded the Distinguished Intelligence Cross, with a 5th Oak Leaf Cluster and the Presidential Medal of Freedom." The medals were pinned. The applause was polite but sustained, an odd mix of military formality and genuine awe. Larissa stood unmoving, her salute precise. She had spent years training herself to be unseen. Now every camera lens in the area was locked onto her. It was not a comfort. After the ceremony, the reception spilled into the officers' club. Junior personnel approached her like she was a living legend, shaking her hand, offering congratulations, asking questions they would never get answered. She responded with polite nods, minimal words. The truth of Ghostwalker was never going to be public, and she preferred it that way. Blackwood found her near a quiet corner, holding 2 glasses of water. "For you, Commander," he said, offering one. "Thank you," she said, accepting it. "How does it feel? Being visible again?" She took a sip before answering. "Different. Temporary." He hesitated, then asked, "The story they're telling, it's not the whole thing, is it?" "The most important parts never are," she said. "The public gets the version they need. That's enough." "I've been approved for intelligence training," he said, almost shyly. "Your recommendation?" "You have the instincts," she said simply. "You notice what others miss. That can't be taught." Westfield joined them then, his posture as straight as ever. "Commander Thorne, my team deploys tomorrow. I wanted to say we owe you more than an apology." Larissa shook his hand. "Your team did their job, Commander. The breaches weren't at your level. What matters is you'll be sharper next time. Your men follow your example. Make it a good one." Hargrove appeared at her side, introducing a tall man in an expensive suit. "Commander Thorne, this is Director Callahan, Central Intelligence." Callahan's handshake was firm. "Your work has impressed us at Langley. We'd like to discuss the possibility of your talents serving elsewhere." "I already have my next assignment," Larissa said evenly. He smiled in that practiced way that promised persistence. "Perhaps we'll talk again." 2 days later, Larissa stood alone on the beach, the Pacific stretching out in front of her. She'd spent years scanning every horizon, weighing every sound, but tonight the only thing she registered was the wind moving over the water. Her phone vibrated. A message from Hargrove. Package secured. Network neutralized. Mission concluded. She closed her eyes for a moment. The weight she'd carried for so long, so constant it had become invisible, lifted just enough for her to feel its absence. Amaranthin was over. McAllister's network was gone. The intelligence was safe. Walking back toward the base, she passed a young female ensign wrestling with an equipment case. Without hesitation, Larissa stepped in and took one end. "Thank you, ma'am," the ensign said, then blinked. "Wait, you're Commander Thorne, right? The one from the ceremony." "Just doing my job, ensign," Larissa replied. "Is it true?" the younger woman asked. "You worked undercover here for years?" "As a janitor." Larissa allowed herself the faintest smile. Parts of the story have been exaggerated. That must have been hard, being invisible for so long. "Invisibility has its advantages," Larissa said. "You see things others miss. You hear truths people only speak when they think no one important is listening." The ensign nodded thoughtfully. "I'll remember that." "Do," Larissa said, shifting the case into a better grip. "In our work, what people don't notice is often more important than what they do." As they walked on, the base lights grew brighter ahead, and Larissa knew that visibility would never be her natural state. But she also knew that, now and then, stepping out of the shadows had its uses. The mission was over. The ghost was gone. Silverleaf was back.